my understanding of uncertainty was all wrong. I thought it was, sort of something, a kind of, state of bafflement that we should eradicate as quickly as possible. That's a very common assumption, but actually uncertainty, both in terms of neuroscience and also psychology and also culturally, it's an accompaniment to good thinking. Uncertainty comes in many, many different forms, and it really has an upside, especially for adapting to a high change world.
Welcome to the Inner Game of Change podcast, uncovering the layers of complexity of organizational change with some of the bright minds in the field. I am Ali Juma, and this is the Inner Game of Change podcast. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Maggie Jackson, an award-winning journalist and author celebrated for her insightful exploration of uncertainty, the impact of technology on our lives, and the science of attention. Her latest book, Uncertain: The Wisdom and Wonder of Being Unsure, uncovers how uncertainty is often misunderstood and can actually promote open-mindedness and innovation. In this episode, Maggie shares her insight on how embracing uncertainty can help us navigate and lead through change, turning unpredictability into a tool for growth and adaptability. I'm grateful to have Maggie chatting with me today. So Maggie, thank you so much for your time, and so good to have you in my podcast, the Inner Game of Change podcast. I am eternally grateful for your time today.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be with you today.
Thank you so much today, Maggie. We're going to talk about your book, Uncertain: The Wisdom and Wonder of Being Unsure. I love it. I am uncertain about what this episode is going to bring about, but we're just going to dive into it. But before we start, it will be fantastic to introduce yourself to my audience, Maggie.
Oh, sure. I come from a journalism background, so I'm a journalist, former Boston Globe columnist. I'm based in New York and Rhode Island, so in the United States, and I'm also an independent scholar and a speaker. And I've worn a lot of hats, but mainly now I've been focusing on my books. So I write about big aspects of humanity that are often misunderstood or very poorly understood by most of us. The Nature of Home was one book. Distraction and the Science of Attention was my second, and now Uncertainty.
Why this topic?
Well, after I finished my book, Distracted, I thought that a companion volume would be about thinking in the digital age. So what do we need to think well? What are we losing as we meld ourselves with technologies and live fragmented, speed-driven ways? So I started to write the book, but the first chapter was about uncertainty. And that really changed the game for me because I realized that there was an explosion of fascinating new research into the wisdom and the benefits of unsureness, and how uncertainty is actually related to human curiosity and adaptability and creativity, which are precisely the kinds of cognitive skill sets that we need today in a time of flux. So I pivoted the book and also discovered that my understanding of uncertainty was all wrong. I thought it was, sort of something, a kind of, state of bafflement that we should eradicate as quickly as possible. That's a very common assumption, but actually uncertainty, both in terms of neuroscience and also psychology and also culturally, it's an accompaniment to good thinking. Uncertainty comes in many, many different forms, and it really has an upside, especially for adapting to a high change world.
I want to ask you, Maggie, about, is there a difference in your opinion between uncertainty and ambiguity?
Well, yes, there very much is. Well, I should start by defining uncertainty. It's pretty simply defined. There are two different kinds. First of all, there's aleatory uncertainty or the unknown. So if you see a headline, uncertainty roils the stock markets, that's really a shorthand for what we cannot know. We can't really know whether the markets will rise or fall, despite all our probabilistic mathematical reasoning. But at the same time, in complement is our uncertainty, epistemic uncertainty, that's called psychological uncertainty. And that's the human response to the unknown. And ambiguity is a form of uncertainty. It's a form of aleatory uncertainty. So it's basically when something can be read or understood in several different ways. So it's just under the umbrella concept of uncertainty, there is ambiguity.
I read one day, and I can't remember where I read it, but our minds are certainty-making machines. We wake up in the morning and we try to make sense of the world, basically, in a predictable way. How easy is it to sort of change that, or at least manage it?
Well, it's true that we live our lives generally depending on something that neuroscientists call predictive processing. So if you're driving home from work and you're on that normal commute and it's routine, you are really on autopilot. And you don't have to really think about, where your house is, et cetera. Predictive processing really rules our lives. And that's naturally a good thing, because for survival's sake, we don't have to think hard about how to make a cup of coffee or usually how to get home anyhow, or how to tie our shoelaces if we still have any, and et cetera. But at the same time, we have an incredible neural system, basically uncertainty, that allows us to have a reality check when routine doesn't suffice anymore. So when you come up with something, when you encounter anything new, unexpected, or ambiguous, murky, such as a traffic jam on your way out home, you're actually, suddenly your brain and body are kind of springing into action. And that's really an uncertainty response. So I call it a reality check on predictive processing. The mind is actually extraordinarily sensitive to different forms of uncertainty. And by that, I mean to what's unexpected or new in the environment. There are different neurotransmitters that are released when you have encounter something that's, expected uncertainty. So that means that you're not really sure whether this particular intersection which is always gummed up on your way home, is going to be worse or better or a little bit worse, but you kind of expect that you don't really sail through that intersection. That is a particular type of uncertainty. And then as well, there's also suddenly, as in, near my house, a bridge was almost about to fall down. It was closed, and that became a tremendous unexpected uncertainty. So there, at that point, norepinephrine, a different kind of neurotransmitter, is released. The whole point of all of those, neural details that I'm relating is that we are very, very sensitive to different types of uncertainty. And that's really important because, it's really important to understand. That leads us to the point that, uncertainty is a very natural state of mind. So I mentioned that when you encounter something new, you have a response. That's actually a stress response. That's actually an instigator of the unease you face or feel when you're uncertain, you're unsure, you're facing something new. Maybe now it's a memo from the boss that's ambiguous, and you're uneasy, but that's actually good stress. It's a powerful way of kind of provoking the system into being wakeful. It's actually called arousal. Uncertainty is related to higher focal attention. Emergency room doctors report that in sticky clinical situations, when they're unsure, that's when they're paying sharp attention. It's also related to higher working memory, and also the brain becomes more receptive to new information. So it's really, really important to stress. And this is one of the ways uncertainty is misunderstood. is that uncertainty, the unease of uncertainty is actually a gift. You're actually on your toes. It's a signal. Uncertainty is a signal that it is time to move from the autopilot, predictive processing, our expectations that everything is as it was yesterday, and move into a state where you're updating your understanding of the world. So uncertainty is really the ally of change.
Why is updating our understanding of the world important for us? Is that because we live in a world where change is constant? Is that because there are a lot of ambiguities? Is that because it's good for us to be in a situation where we are open to the unknown?
Well, I mean, yes to all of the above. Basically, of course, I painted a picture of life on autopilot, and it's true that we need, for survival's sake, not to reinvent the wheel of every step we take during the day. But at the same time, and of course, the business you're in underscores this. Life is mutable and dynamic and changing. It depends on whether we pick up on that. It depends on whether the change is relevant. But studies show that. Well, first of all, my main point is that uncertainty's unease is good stress, and that helps us put on our toe. We shouldn't retreat from that uneasy feeling, this signal of uncertainty. But also, this uncertainty is a state that helps you pick up on signals or change in your environment that you might not otherwise. So, for instance, studies show that if you're constantly expecting that life is predictable. That really is a mindset that many people have. I'm walking to the Monday morning meeting. I expect more of the same, blah, blah. I sort of close my eyes to what's going on in the room. That kind of state of expectation of predictability actually lowers our ability to pick up on nuances, on subtle changes, a difference in tone in the room, or what your boss or the presenter just said that's important but subtle. So it's really important. Uncertainty is this state, this sort of in-between state that's really allows us to pick up on the change that is going on around us without being overwhelmed. There's a balancing act here. You don't want to be, like a new puppy dog or a new baby who's just constantly, actually babies are really intelligent. They actually learn through surprise. They seek out surprise in their environment, and that is how they learn. In other words, babies, infants, human infants and other animals are tremendously wise or basically wired, I guess you could say, to use uncertainty to learn. And so that's why it's really important to be uncertain, to allow it into our lives. And I would say to be skillfully uncertain. It's not a matter of being willy-nilly, constantly unsure, stuck in indecision. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a whole new science that shows not only that uncertainty is very important, first of all, for this wakefulness, but also, a lot of research is showing how we can be skillfully unsure, productively unsure.
I want to go into the workplace, Maggie. The workplace nowadays is full of change. So we go to work every day to hardly any day that will come without something new comes our way. In fact, leaders go to work to make decisions, and these decisions, they become changes. And every change throws a lot of uncertainty around it. That's why probably I focus a lot on my practice on demystifying things for people. So creating a level of predictability and certainty around a change. From where you sit and from your insight and from your experience, how is the workplace today? How is that changed from the past? Is there a mechanism now to create more certainty despite the outside world is full of uncertainty? What's your take on it?
Well, I mean, that's a huge question, and I can't generalize about whether or not the workplace is suffused with certainty or not. I mean, there are, ways in which I think that not just today's workplace, but I think there are ways in which, the workplace historically in many parts of the developed world has been created to, seek certainty, as the philosopher John Dewey said. He was talking about the Western culture in general, the quest for certainty that has sort of ruled our lives. You can look at this through the lens of the emphasis on efficiency, industrialization, and even previous to that, medieval times, there was an increasing emphasis on efficiency. So the rationalist idea of intelligence is to achieve a goal, no matter how you can get there. And so the emphasis is on outcome. We hear about outcome-oriented meetings, and then technology adds another layer to this. Idea that whatever is fast, whatever is instant, whatever is neat and pat, a quick fix or a template or a PowerPoint is, what is the image of success. So in that sense, we are driven toward toward a culture that emphasizes uncertainty as both performative and also as a goal. That flies against what really, again, that sets us apart from change. Because when you're looking for certainty as quickly as you can, you're again shutting down on the process. So just one tiny example. How do we actually generate this arousal, or how do we harness uncertainty in the best possible way? Well, one thing we could do is dial back on outcome fixation. This in particular in stressful challenges such as giving a presentation, or, a really tough month where you're, trying to create a new product. These are the times when it's actually corrosive. It undermines your eventual success to be constantly fixated on the outcome. This can be through fear of failure. As I sit giving my presentation, what is my boss thinking? It lends itself to anxiety. It removes your mind from the present moment, and the present moment is that, wakefulness of uncertainty. So this is something that can really help us, kind of understand and wield uncertainty. And in just a really granular, specific, not a workplace, but sort of a workplace example, is that in professional high level tennis tournaments like Wimbledon or the US Open, if the trophy is exhibited very prominently on the court during the finals, whoever's the favorite begins to struggle, and they may not lose all the time, but they lose points and they just don't do as well. That trophy is called reward-based distraction. So again, it could be fear of failure. It could be kind of greed. But if you're, looking at the trophies of life or fearing that you'll stumble, you're putting the cart before the horse. You're undermining the process that will get you to the great outcome. And uncertainty, of course, is all about process. So I think we need to push back. I wouldn't say, we have become more certain today than ever before in the workplace. But I think that there is evidence that certainly we can accept and understand and utilize uncertainty a lot better in medicine, in business, in the sciences, in consulting. There's so many different ways in which we can open up to and start studying and learning how to use uncertainty and actually stop shoving it under the rug. And as I mentioned earlier, my initial impression was that uncertainty was something that needs to be eradicated as quickly as possible. That leads you to shut down on, the better answer, and that's the fallacy that I thought about uncertainty, and that's, I think, very common today. So we can definitely do a lot better when it comes to embracing uncertainty.
I always think, Maggie, that all the innovators in the world and, creators, they certainly stayed longer in the space of uncertainty. Is my impression right? Because if they were certain about something, that would not be created.
Well, I think that uncertainty and not knowing is very important to innovation, simply because innovation and creativity, whether it's a new product or an artwork, is really synonymous with moving into the unknown. Mm-hmm. So, the brain systems related to idea generation are actually very much similar to the ones that are related to daydreaming. And what is a daydream, or what is a generating an idea? It's setting off from the here and now. It's asking what if questions. It's moving away from what you do know. And that's a very important marker of creativity, that you move away from the known. And in fact, if people are trying to generate ideas, in creativity assessments show that most people get stuck with what they already know. And one of the most classic creativity assessments is called, alternate uses test. So people are asked simply to think of different uses for a brick or a shoe. Believe it or not, that's highly predictive of workplace and life creativity. It's a really simple but important test. Most people just think of, if they're thinking about a brick, they think about walls, they think about, courtyards, they think about roads, they just think, they get stuck in the known, and they can come up with lots of ideas, but they're not new ideas. Whereas creative people set sail from the known, from what they know. They move into more remote connections. They think of the brick as a mini pizza stone. They think of the brick as, some person at a conference who I was leading a workshop on these sorts of ideas, and she said, "Oh, it would be a toy for my dog to fetch." And wonderful imagination, a little bit different for a dog toy, but moving away from the known and the here and the now is really important for creativity. And what is that? But that's what I call uncertainty in action. So I mentioned a minute ago that uncertainty comes in many different modes. A daydream is uncertainty in action. Pausing and sleeping on a problem and doing that kind of nothingness that we denigrate in this hurried society, that's uncertainty in action. You're using time and suspense in order to let your mind percolate and make meaning, or come up with a problem, come up with an insight. Uncertainty in action is the kind of deliberation that a surgeon or an accountant will do in a crisis. Just pause for a few minutes and then actively inhabit the question. That's a form of uncertainty in action. So it's really important that we not only understand uncertainty, but we also begin to understand all of the different ways it's available in our life to harness and utilize.
I liked what in your book you talked about Keats, and I think the term Keats used was negative capability, which is basically sitting in the unknown and feeling, how am I going to put this, feeling comfortable in the uncomfortable. I want to share with you an example the other day of me personally. I am working on a project, and then immediately, automatically, my mind started thinking about the problem and how we're going to solve it and all of that. And I slapped myself on the hand thinking, I just read Maggie's book, that the first impressions and the first solutions are guiding steps for us. And we just need to sit a little bit longer to really understand, and what else, and what else, and what else. Is that how we need to start thinking about the first solutions that come into our heads?
Yes. I mean, this is true of creativity, as I was mentioning, but also when it comes to problem solving, it's very important to understand that the first thought that comes to mind, whether you're diagnosing the problem or coming up with a solution, is what's based on the past. So here we are, that links to that predictive processing. You're basically, assessing a problem by thinking about what worked in the past. This is automatic. It's basically the root of heuristic shortcut thinking. So an expert in, a surgeon in an operating room who comes across or a difficult new situation in operating on the patient, well, actually, their first thought that comes to mind is the old solution or the old assessment. And that's, the doctor in the, who's dealing with the patient outside the operating room who hears chest pains thinks heart attack. That's heuristic thinking based on the past. We need to get away from that, even in a matter of minutes in a crisis. And I think that that's in contrast to the kind of expert who relies on these past solutions, actually called the routine expert. The other kind of expertise, the more superior expertise, is the adaptive expert. They know when and how to be unsure. So as I was mentioning, they actually stop. In fact, studies show that across various disciplines, adaptive experts spend more time assessing a complex new problem than even novices do. They're spending more time on a problem than novices, but only new and complex problems. If it's a routine problem, if they kind of sense that they've seen this situation before, well, then they can jump to a conclusion. But that's insufficient for dealing with change, for dealing with the new. And it's really important to be that adaptive expert. The other markers, the characteristics of adaptive expertise are that they remain curious and skeptical even in those routine situations. So they're on their toes. They're expecting change. As I mentioned before, they are not, complacent even in routine. When it comes to non-routine situations, they spend more time assessing. They also test and evaluate different options, which is extremely rare in the business world. People might know that you should look at 4 different possibilities for what went wrong in the focus group with your new product. But most of the time, I think 80% of strategic business decisions are built on one option, assessing one option only and running with it. And that's not related to success. So the adaptive expert, it's an approach to life. And when you can embrace and also utilize uncertainty skillfully, you really change your entire life rather than seeking certainty, rather than clinging to what you know, rather than being the kind of expert who hands down pronouncements from on high. You're actually a person who is far more sort of understanding of the mutability of life, understanding the dynamism of life. But also, many people in robotics or medicine or business have told me that to be uncertain, to have this skillful mindset is actually liberating. They use that word again and again and again because you're facing life with curiosity and wonder and not with fear and anxiety and outcome fixation and this performative emphasis to do it fast and get it over with and think at a glance and all these sorts of things that really harm our society today, I believe. One interesting story that I was told actually not so long ago is that there was a skyscraper built in Manhattan in the 90s, the Citicorp building, very, very famous, very creative design, etc. And it was up, this 54-story building, and it was up. And a few months later after that, a student called up the chief architect and said, well, in our class, we were doing calculations about wind, and it does seem as though this skyscraper will fall down if a particular kind of wind hits the corner of the building. And the chief architect thought, oh, no, slammed down the phone, just completely ignored this, reviled this student's comments. That's kind of, he was seeking to be a routine expert, and then he went and did a lot of new calculations and actually talked to other experts and realized that, lo and behold, this building was under threat under certain conditions that they hadn't taken into consideration earlier. And so secretly at night, the workers and painters and cleaners and all sorts of staff would move in after the office workers left, and they actually welded certain corners of the building to make it right. And it stands to this day, only because this architect, very famous person, admitted he wasn't sure, and then evaluated and tested and spent time on the diagnosis. He inhabited the question. He was able to know, that uncertainty was effective at that point. And he felt as though maybe he'd be reviled in his industry. He's actually considered, this is a case study that reflects well on him for being an adaptive expert. We also have to learn how to say, I don't know. That's very, very important.
And that's really an important point because, and I was thinking about this last week, is there a correlation or a perceived correlation between knowing and competency? So if I say I don't know, to the simple-minded person, this may indicate that I'm not competent. And that's the danger that we have in the workplace. I also see another danger, another limitation in the workplace, unfortunately. Maggie, as you would know, in the workplace, we're driven by projects, and the projects have got budget, timeline. You're always sort of stuck in this paradigm of, do I have time to be reflective? Do I have time to investigate? Or do I go to the shortcut that, this is how we're going to do it because of time limitation? How do we sort of balance that beautiful dance between the two? My mindset around uncertainty is because over the years, it's always proven that when I stay longer in the uncertain space, I get rewarded by more ideas. And because I get rewarded, I repeat that. So me sitting in the uncertain spot, it's a pleasurable place. But not everybody's got that.
I think that it's really important to know that expressing or being a leader and being uncertain or expressing uncertainty or, et cetera, is not a simple thing. That's where the new science of uncertainty and the education, that we need to have around uncertainty comes in, because it's not a matter of just saying, I don't know, throwing up your hands and walking away.
Yes.
If you're a doctor or a project leader or a teacher or even a parent, it's not a matter of just baldly saying, I don't know, and full and stop. Actually, studies show that messaging uncertainty can be more persuasive than messaging certainty in the workplace. And how? Well, when you, as a boss, express uncertainty when it's linked with potential, that's very important. So rather than saying, I don't know, you say, well, there's the potential to do this deadline by, Thursday, a very high potential, I'm pretty sure, et cetera. So that's giving people far more information than if they say, absolutely, we're going to meet the deadline when it's really not possible or not probable. And it's also more information than if you just say, I don't know. So I think that we have to work around the vocabulary, the language, and again, the gradations, the spectrum of uncertainty, how you frame it. Another very important, useful tool in and around leadership and uncertainty is to not be afraid to use words called hedge words such as maybe or sometimes. Now, these seem anathema, this sort of linguistic word seems anathema in today's workplace, but it shouldn't be. Studies out of Harvard show that when executives are actually, debating a point, a difficult point with another peer or another executive, those who listen well and also express use hedge words such as maybe are seen as more professional. They're seen as more approachable. They're seen as someone who other people want to work with later, rather than the kind of executive who says, therefore, or you're wrong. So these kinds of words, and they're not related to one particular gender. This is a mythology that's often banted around that, these hedge words are more used by females or they're more seen as female, but that's not true. They're used when they're used at all, they're used by both genders. So I think that it's really important not to be ashamed of it. And what do these words do? Two things. First, they linguistically signal that you're receptive to other people's opinions. If I say maybe, that means you're receptive. And then secondly, they signal that there's something more to know. Now that is really important. That's the heartbeat, the foundation of all learning. The student who doesn't know where their knowledge begins and ends is not going to go very far. Similarly with a leader or a project manager, you just need to know the limits of your knowledge. And so I did a big study of the Mars Explorer rover mission. This was the NASA U.S. highly diverse international team that put the rovers on Mars, discovered water had flowed on Mars, etc. They used part of their success had something to do with their constant use of disagreement. I mean, judicious, respectful, productive disagreement. They were willing to contest with one another constantly. But when they were in these sort of micro conflicts, it's really important to note that 100% of these discussions had expressions of uncertainty. And that was many studies show that that's why they succeeded. As one Princeton sociologist told me, that's why we're still talking about them today. They're really willing to express uncertainty, to live in the space of uncertainty, and to make it very, very robustly productive. And that also involved disagreement, which is something that many workplaces don't allow for.
I really like that. I'm thoroughly enjoying the conversation, Maggie. You're making me think about a lot of stuff that I need to go back and go into that rabbit hole. I discovered the other day, and actually on the back of reading your book, I used the word or the term, I want to go deeper into the rabbit hole, only to discover that that's actually going to the uncertain world of knowing. And lots of us avoid going into a rabbit hole because there's a lot of unknown in it. And so I discovered even in my vocabulary that helps me convey my messages and to people I work with. I also find out that one way to expand or dial up our curiosity is to work with others, because they can bring different perspectives to a particular problem, especially if it's a project, even if you are bound by time limitation. And I haven't really seen any leader yet in my life that will say to you, don't be creative in your solution. I think sometimes we do gotta have to take the leap and be comfortable that what I know is not the whole story. And especially living in today's world, where we know there are a lot of nuances in there and I can't see everything. I mean, we have blind spots all the time. And so you're going to have to be open to those. I'm aware of time, and I want to ask you a question around technology. Is technology today, can you see it as an enabler for us to be comfortable in uncertain times?
Well, I think currently technology tends to work the opposite way. It tends to shore up this certainty-focused culture. The look and feel of the internet is, almost entirely based on neat, pat answers. I mean, Google answers the question when you're searching before you even finish asking the question.
Yes.
It's giving an answer before you finish asking. It really just offers up new constant search results without really saying it doesn't know. So you're constantly swimming in this idea that there's an immediate answer. In fact, people who step away who do brief searching online come away thinking they know more than they do. There's that, very toxic inability to see what you don't know. And, it's a form of hubris. I think that and all of what I've just said changes what it means to know. That's one reason I wanted to write the book. Is knowing just, 100 characters? Is knowing always instant? No, there's a whole world of the, not knowing and the process involved in getting to a better answer. The other ways in which technology, I think, undermines our, the way we approach knowledge is through automation bias. I mean, studies after studies from, way back in the days of the factory and, to the telegraph or, whatnot. Now, right on into studies of pilots, et cetera, show that we become complacent, kind of an extension of that idea of hubris. When you are working with technology, again, whether it's a machine in a shop or now it's laptops and AI generated solutions, the human begins to get complacent because we're working alongside with something that seems so smart and quick and is so smart and quick in certain ways, but not, so we begin to sort of dial back our own ability to think and to wonder and to ponder and to pause and all of the things that are really important that are not narrowly linear, not maybe even instantly efficient, but efficient over the long term. But the good news is that there is a huge push now among some of AI's top leaders to actually make robots and models unsure. It's a very complicated topic, but I'll just be very, very brief. Because the definition of rationalist intelligence is to achieve a goal, that's how AI was set up. AI, artificial intelligence, was set up to just, achieve a goal. The robot housekeeper will fetch that coffee, however it can most efficiently, most quickly, based on past reward. The robot in the factory will stack that package most efficiently, but at the same time, it's unable to deal safely with human in its purview. So right now, they're working on very complicated ways to make robots and models more unsure. That is, they're teachable, stoppable. The robot housekeeper will ask, well, which route to get the coffee, or show you a scenario about how to get the coffee. Or, this is very, very important. And these new robots, the unsure robots, are actually seen as more intelligent by beta users. So dozens of laboratories are working on that. And maybe because technology is so influential in our lives, maybe an unsure robot can even make humans begin to accept and embrace and utilize uncertainty more as a little silver lining to this I'm really applauding this new movement, and I hope that it takes off. And I hope that when we go to the store and buy a new laptop, or maybe get that robot to, keep our elderly mother company, that we'll soon see an unsure robot who can ask questions and not just be all sure.
I love it. And fascinating world. Last question to you. What would be your advice for us, people like myself in the profession of change management in the workplace, when it comes to encouraging our stakeholders to be open to possibilities, and that the uncertain can be far more exciting than the certain?
Sure. Well, I think drop the idea of not knowing and uncertainty as weakness, because it doesn't have to be, and science shows otherwise. Understand that uncertainty is not monolithic. It's not just one, swampy, negative kind of mindset. It's woven into this fabric of our lives, and we can wake up to uncertainty, that's going on in diverse forms all around us. I think, try to daydream. It doesn't have to be about what you had for lunch, but it can be about what you might be doing in that project or how you're affecting change. Let your mind go and drift. It's not only great for your memory, so your learning will be more, deeply kind of embedded in complex ways, but also it's really important for insight. Again, realize that sometimes we're slowing down. Uncertainty is a space of possibilities, but then when you roll up your sleeves and wade in and investigate those possibilities, and kind of leave the problem open. That's just what uncertainty is. The rewards are huge. I think that the last thing I'll say is that there's a personality trait called tolerance of uncertainty that's getting a lot of attention in the business world and medicine and clinical psychology. When people are taught to bolster their tolerance of uncertainty, then they are actually less anxious, they're less worried, and they're more resilient. So this is really a road to human flourishing. And I think that's important for both leaders and also for everyone in the workplace to understand. The single most sort of essential definition, tolerant some uncertainty, means you see uncertainty as a challenge. And when you're tolerant of uncertainty, you're more curious and flexible, and you see knowledge as kind of a tapestry whose mutability is its very strength. If you're intolerant of uncertainty, you see uncertainty, not knowing, and the unknowns as a threat, which is a very narrow and sort of a sad way to live. People who are intolerant are more rigid thinkers, who treat knowledge as a rock that they need to defend. They don't like surprises. I mean, as we go into a world that is proven in so many ways to be changing, whether it's geopolitics or climate or, the work hours and job security, there's a lot of higher rates of unpredictability. So the question is, how will we respond? Will we retreat into certainty, which is very often not productive or leads to success, or will we begin to learn how to be, productively unsure? And I think that there are just a lot of different ways we can do that, and in small ways. Delegate more at work, try something new every single day, and just try new things. And in small doses of uncertainty, try on the unknown. And that's really very going to help your well-being.
One step at a time. I tell that to my son. I want to read you something that, Maggie, that I read when I was a teenager. And then it did not make sense to me then, but it only made sense. I actually went back to it after reading your book. Virginia Woolf said, "The future is dark, which is the best thing the future can be, I think." When I was a teenager, I thought, why is dark good? And now I understand that dark does not mean negative or anything. Dark is just the nature of the unknown. So I am grateful for your time today. You've helped me learn a lot, and certainly made me think about quite a few things, even though I consider myself as a warrior for the unknown. We're going to put all your information in the podcast, Maggie, including your book. And final words from you?
Oh, well, seek uncertainty. It's not the disaster we assume. It actually is liberating and freeing. And that's a really great way to wake up to tomorrow.
That is a great place to stop here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye. Thank you for listening. If you found this episode valuable, remember to subscribe to stay updated on upcoming episodes. Your support is truly appreciated. And by sharing this podcast with your colleagues, friends, and fellow change practitioners, it can help me reach even more individuals and professionals who can benefit from these discussions. Remember, and in my opinion, change is an enduring force, and you will only have a measure of certainty and control when you embrace it. Until next time, thank you for being part of the Inner Game of Change community. I am Ali Jama, and this is the Inner Game of Change podcast.
Oh, it was good. Oh, yes. Yeah, no, that was good. Thank you. And thank you very much. And I'm glad, very interesting.